Well, hello again, vinyl community. Once again, I have lots of records to show, so I want to jump right in with a brand new one, brand new release from France. This is pRéCis AiMaNt, and pRéCis AiMaNt consists of two people, Pascal.vaucel and vocalist Carla Diratz. And this music is very deep and dark, foreboding, jazz and funk beats with evil chattering in the backwaters. There's flourishes of psychedelic guitar spiraling out sideways, and Carla Diratz, who is just a force of nature with her anguished and expressive and expressionistic voice. Reference points might be Dagmar Krause of Henry Cow and Art Bears fame, maybe a little Marianne Faithfull circa Why'd You Do It, Broken English. They do mostly original pieces, mostly in English. There is a cover of Robert Wyatt's Sea Song, which is such a personal song that it's a very dangerous choice to cover, but Carla has the emotional gravitas to make it work. From Belgium, Aksak Maboul, 11 danses pour combattre la migraine, 11 dances to combat the migraine. This is a recent reissue of the 1977 original on the Kamikaze label, and this is primarily the work of the composer, producer, and multi-instrumentalist Mark Hollander. This is associated with the rock in opposition movement, so there's a blend of jazz, electronics, classical, Eastern European folk and dance music, and just all-around wackiness. Some have compared this to Frank Zappa, and maybe it's a point of reference. And this comes with an insert that shows the cover of the reissue version from the Crammed label, as well as having new liner notes. From 1978, Lol Coxhill, The Joy of Paranoia on the Ogun label. This is typically eccentric, despite the liner notes that imply that the album is some kind of concession to accessibility. And it opens with a sidelong improvisation, the Wakefield Capers, where Lol Coxhill's saxophone is joined by acoustic, electric, and bass guitars. And it ends with Coxhill steaming through the standards, Lover Man and Perdido. But for me, the highlight is the Joy of Paranoia Waltz, which features a plethora of overdubbed Coxhills in a sonic hall of mirrors. And I don't know quite how many saxophonists come to a plethora, but listen to the album and you can figure it out. Anthony Braxton and the late Muhal Richard Abrams, duets 1976. This is great, spirited stuff, mostly Braxton's typically angular compositions, but they also take on Eric Dolphy's Miss Anne and Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag. Illinois Jacquet, The Blues, That's Me. And this is a 1969 release on the Prestige label. This copy is actually a 1972 repress on the Green label. And liner notes make a case for Jacquet, who was born in Louisiana, belonging to the tradition of tough Texas tenor sax men. So he's a guy named Illinois, born in Louisiana, and he's a Texas tenor sax player. So I am geographically confused, but the music is wonderful. Highlights include the lengthy title track, which is sumptuously bluesy, relaxed, and Jacquet makes a delayed entrance. It starts off showcasing the guitarist, Tiny Grimes, and you've also got Wynton Kelly on piano here. But he takes his time, Jacquet does, and blows up a storm. And the real track for me on here is a dark, moody version of Round Midnight played on bassoon. Yes, Illinois Jacquet on bassoon, and it's brilliant. Revolutionary Ensemble. This is a self-titled 1972 release on ESP disc. And the Revolutionary Ensemble consists of percussionist Jerome Cooper, bassist Cirone, and violinist Leroy Jenkins. The album consists of one politically charged free jazz epic titled Vietnam, Parts 1 and 2. Here's one that's been on my want list for a while. McCoy-Tyner Extensions. This is on Blue Note, originally from 1972. This is the repress with the solid blue label from 1975. And you see the classic National Geographic cover design. And this is just a brilliant set of tracks. You can't go wrong with this all-star lineup. It's McCoy-Tyner on piano, Wayne Shorter and Gary Bartz on saxophones, Ron Carter on bass, Elvin Jones on drums, and Alice Coltrane on harp. Great, great album. Okay, moving to Berlin for some electronic music. Time Wind by Klaus Schulze from 1975. This is the British release from 1975 on the Virgin subsidiary Caroline. And this was the first Klaus Schulze I ever heard, not long after it was released. It consists of two very long, sidelong pieces, both sort of tributes to Richard Wagner. One side is Bayreuth Return, referring to the town where Wagner set up shop, and Wanfried 1883 is the other, Wanfried being the name of the villa Wagner lived on in the later part of his life in Bayreuth, and 1883 is the year of his death. And this is just spaced out music, as you can tell by the cover, the great Urs Amann artwork. And some indications of how Klaus Schulze scored the music for himself. And moving on to Klaus Schulze's old band, Tangerine Dream. This is Encore, the double live LP recorded on their 1977 United States tour. And in fact, here's the original hype sticker, recorded live in America. Like the Klaus Schulze album, this is one long piece per LP side. However, one of the tracks, Monolight, was turned into a single, Monolight Part 2. This was the last album by the classic trio lineup of Tangerine Dream. The late Edgar Froese, Peter Baumann, and Christopher Franke. Next up, Hungarian composer George Ligeti. This is an album on the Candide label of his Aventures and Nouvelles Aventures on side 1. That is a piece for, or pair of pieces for flute, horn, cello, bass, harpsichord, piano, percussion, and 3 singers. The second side is 2 pieces for organ, performed by Gerd Zacher. The organ pieces Volumina and Etude No. 1 Harmonies. The pieces are both based more on blocks of sound. There are indications in the liner notes that it's intended to be experienced as sound more than music. The Aventures pieces have the music basically as little discrete events separated by silences, and the vocalists are instructed to make noises. There are no words. The organ pieces, the volumina, is very minimal. It's basically a single chord that is, I guess, played in different inversions and subjected to different volume levels. So the music is on that plane, not so much the horizontal level of going from note to note, but just the vertical level of the sound pressure of the blocks of sound. And that ties into the next composer, Iannis Xenakis. This is his electroacoustic music, 1970 original release on the Nonesuch label. And these are all works of musique concrète, wherein Xenakis rejected the typical approach to musique concrète. Now, musique concrète is music as electronic music that's created with natural sounds, as opposed to coming from synthesizers and oscillators that generate the sound electronically. Some people distinguish between musique concrète and electronic music. I consider musique concrète to be a subset of electronic music. And that's what he means with his electroacoustic music. And it's typical of musique concrète composers to make abrupt transitions from sound to sound, create rhythms by splicing and going directly from one sound event to a contrasting one, maybe moving very quickly through a lot of different sounds. And Xenakis preferred to have sustained sounds that were very complex, very rich in sonic information, and develop them very gradually so that you might not hear any change while listening, but gradually it would get from point A to point B. The sound sources would be, as I said, things that were very rich sonically, and he was interested in taking very quiet sounds and amplifying them extremely. So the piece Concrète pH is based on the sound of smoldering charcoal. And it is also a companion piece to Edgar Varèse's famous Poème électronique, which is one of the most famous pieces of musique concrète in musical history. The Poème électronique was famously written to be heard in the Philips Pavilion at the 1958 World Fair in Brussels. And Concrète pH was the music you heard in the corridor as you entered the building. And once again, I'm showing a new Stockhausen acquisition. Again, this is one I used to have back in the day, Hymnen, or Anthems, double LP on Deutsche Grammophon. Oh, and hi, Rob. This is a combination of concrete sounds with spoken word and actual electronic music. It's divided into 4 regions corresponding to the geographical regions of the national anthems that the piece is based on. It was meant to be expandable, but Stockhausen never got past the 4 regions that are presented here. This is really not one of my favorite Stockhausen pieces. It's really kind of like listening to somebody slowly dial through the shortwave band for an hour. But if that's your idea of a good time, hey. Finally, Tashi plays Stravinsky from 1977. Tashi was a quartet of the Turkish-born violinist Ida Kavafian, a pianist Peter Serkin, who's the son of the renowned pianist Rudolf Serkin, cellist Fred Sherry, who has appeared on a lot of John Zorn's recordings in the 21st century, and clarinetist Richard Stoltzman. And they were originally formed to record Olivier Messiaen's famous Quartet for the End of Time, which was composed during World War II when Messiaen was imprisoned by the Nazis and wrote the piece for the only instruments that they could rustle up in the prison camp, which happened to be a piano, a violin, a cello, and a clarinet. So Tashi formed with that instrumentation, and since there aren't that many works written for that specific combination, on their albums they, after recording the Messiaen first, they would find themselves having to add guests or leave somebody out. Their second album was the Schubert-Trout Quintet, which did not have a part for Richard Stoltzman. There's no clarinet, but they did have to bring in 2 more string players. So on this album, they do that. They have, they appear in various configurations of solo, duo, and trio, and then on the septet, they're joined by 3 guests on the French horn, the bassoon, and the viola. The music starts off with L'Histoire du Soldat, which is one of my favorite Stravinsky pieces in its original form. This is the reduction Stravinsky wrote for the trio of piano, clarinet, and violin. There's also another piece where Stravinsky did a miniaturization of one of his famous pieces, the Suite Italienne, which is based on themes from the Pulcinella ballet, but this is written for just cello and piano. There's the 3 pieces for clarinet solo, the septet I mentioned, and the Pastoral, originally for voice and piano, which Stravinsky wrote various different adaptations of, and this version is for violin and piano. L'Histoire du Soldat, though, as I say, is a particular favorite, and that's a piece that I've seen in its full form, which is an hour-long theater piece with narration. It's a story of a soldier who makes a deal with the devil. And I've seen it performed live twice by the San Francisco Symphony. The first time was maybe close to 20 years ago, and the narrator was Patrick Stewart. And they contrived to include a couple of Star Trek jokes in the narration. Just a few years ago, I saw them perform it again, and the narrator, was advertised. The narrator was going to be Elvis Costello. And after I'd purchased my ticket, they said, "Oh, by the way, we're also having Malcolm McDowell playing the devil." So, great. That was the second time I saw it. So, that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for all your comments, and be well, and I'll talk with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.